This Mark II Golf has been sat in the corner of a barn for nearly 10 years, maybe more. And as you can see, it's a bit unloved and is going to need a bit of work to bring it back. So far, we've stripped the engine out. It's got no gearbox, drive shaft or engine. So it really is a blank canvas. And we've decided to take the running gear from this 3.5 convertible and put it straight in to the Mark II. Now this should be a quite straightforward swap. It's been done loads of times before and we're trying to do it on a budget. But this is a good car to give up its heart to get that Mark II back on the road. Now, I promised weekly uploads on this build series, so we're gonna try and get this video up this week. Now it's Friday at the moment, and the reason that we haven't made any progress on this all week is for a couple of reasons. One, I went to an auction and bought a load of random Mark II stuff. I might show you that in a later video. Let me know if you're interested. But the other reason is I've got some company in the barn today. With me, I've got our friend Monkey. Now, you've seen Monkey in some previous videos. Monkey clearly knows his way around a Mark II Golf. So it seemed like the perfect opportunity to get Dave up the barn today, strip apart this 3.5, get ready to put it into the Mark II. So I guess first things first, we're going to start stripping the front end off this convertible. Dave, what do you think we need to do?
I think we're going to be pulling off the whole subframe. Pull it all off, 6 bolts-ish, and then drop the subframe off. Might have to have a bit of fun with the exhaust. But yeah, we'll see what bolts fight and which one's down.
Okay, so pretty much the same as we did with the Mark II, except with the Mark II, we left the subframe in. We want to use this Mark III subframe in the Mark II because it's newer, but also because it's got the power steering setup on it already. So instead of swapping everything over, it makes sense, just like Monkey said, 6 bolts, subframe out with the power steering setup already attached, and then we can slide it underneath the Mark II and get it bolted up. The only thing that might be a challenge is the exhaust, but worst case, we can always cut it off because we're not planning on reusing that. We've got some budget bits to go back onto this that we'll start to see as we put it back together. To start with, we've got to tear down this Mark III. So we're going to take the front end off and go from there. Now, these cars are weird because it's a Mark III Golf with a Mark IV front end on. Now, we need to take this Mark IV front bumper off. So there's some bolts underneath the grille, and then it turns out that the others are underneath these grills at the bottom. So with the bumper off, you can see that actually that's a really weird front panel compared to a standard Mark III. But again, bolts are bolts. They all come off pretty much the same way. So in no time at all, the front end is off. All right, what are you thinking, Dave?
Thinking we better put up in the air.
Yeah.
I want to have a look at that exhaust sooner rather than later.
Yes, good point.
Yeah, we've got to get the wheels off as well so we can get access.
Yeah.
And we should be able to get rid of some of these ancillaries and then drop the whole thing off.
Be a lot handier if the ramp was installed and working, wouldn't it?
It does seem like a false economy to be doing this exactly on a ramp's footprint and not being able to use it.
I mean, to be honest, Dave, you get a ramp for free. Sometimes you've got to put a little bit of work into it. But for now, we've got to do it the old school way, on the floor, with some rubber mats to save the knees. But yeah, look. So first things first, we'll jack it up, get the wheels off, get it on some axle stands, and away we go. With the car up in the air, Dave, what are your thoughts on the exhaust?
Yeah, it's going to be a bit of a twat, I think.
All right, well, there's only one thing for it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I reckon it'll come off at the slip joint.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So no cutting required?
I think we're all right. I think we're all right. So now, I think we do the ancillaries, take the gear linkage off, and basically clear all this area around, ready to drop the engine off.
Okay, sounds easy. So it's just going around disconnecting everything from the top of the engine. So we're starting with the airbox, then the throttle cable, and then just everything around that. I'm not gonna lie, I was a bit nervous when you're going at the battery tray with the angle grinder thinking, shit, we've got all the wires under there.
I knew what I was doing.
Yeah, well, it's easy to say that after the fact, isn't it, Dave?
Do you see any cut wires? Are there any cut wires there?
No.
Exactly.
Oh God, Dave's cutting stuff again. Really? So that was a Jubilee clip on the power steering line.
Yes, it upset me. Well, at the minute it's coming out nicely in one, and it's all going into the bucket.
Yeah.
Because I did think about just yoinking the hose off, but then we'd have two outlets,
Yeah.
both equally chucking out fluid. At this point, we can catch it all.
So power steering fluid is not meant to be black, is what we're saying.
No.
Now we've pretty much finished up taking all the ancillaries, the power steering, the starter motor, bolts, and kind of everything's ready to go now. So we've got the engine here. We need to support the engine, so we'll get the engine crane in a second, and then we've got to take this front cross member off. That'll drop slightly further forward, because down here we've got the gear linkage bolts and we've got the engine mount bolts at the back here as well.
See, you've done it now.
Oh, mate, it's so confusing.
Let's go on one each, shall we?
Yeah, because we're taking the subframe off with the engine still attached, we actually don't need to undo the engine mount bolts. But what we do need to do is the steering knuckle. So there's I think it's a 10mm bolt on that.
13.
Is it 13? So we've got a 13mm bolt on there, which with the engine tipped forward slightly, is going to give us a little bit more access just to get those last bits off. And then we should be able to pull all of this straight out the bay, ready to take a look, and then obviously get the Mark II ready for it to go in. So with the engine out, we'll have the brakes out, and we just need to take the fuel tank out. So in terms of donor parts on this, we're going to be using the fuel tank, the loom to the fuel pump in the back, so we need to strip that out the loom. We're going to use the engine, the gearbox, and the front brakes as well. So that'll give us 115 brake horsepower, maybe a little more because we're taking the cat out because it's a Mark II, it doesn't need it. We've got the 16 valve front brakes as well. So all in all, it's quite a nice little package that will go in a Mark II without too much fuss for very little money. And these things are still out there super cheap, between £200 and £500. They are all over Facebook, especially at the moment. The sun's coming out, you'd think the prices are going up, but a lot of these have got torn roofs and leak like a sieve. So actually, you can probably still find yourself a bargain. Before we get ahead of ourselves, a couple of things we need to do is we need to take the pinch bolts out of the struts here, 18s and 19s. We'll whip those out. We're gonna leave these old shocks in the car, and then obviously the hubs, steering arms, drive shafts, everything will come out as one to make it all a little bit easier. Yeah. Do you want to bring the engine crane in at this stage, or? There we go. There we go.
The engine crane.
Now the engine's out of the car. We've got to take the loom out, the fuel tank, and that's kind of everything done with 3.5. We could take the rear beam out because it's got a disc rear beam. You have to worry about the brake bias valves. I normally use 4K ones.
Okay.
But you don't find many 4Ks in breakage yards these days. We've got the engine out, so what we're going to do is we're going to get in the car now. We're going to head off, get something to eat, and have a look and see what we think we need to do to this engine before we put it back in, or before we put it into the little grey driver over there.